guardian of Eternia. He's the protector of King Randor's legacy. He wears fur-covered briefs. So staggeringly masculine they had to give him two male names. He-Man was the star of one of the longest-running toy and media franchises ever to exist. Today we're bringing you 100 facts about Masters of the Universe. Before we get started, you should know that you have the power! The toy line that would one day be known as He-Man and the Masters of the Universe started life in the late 1970s. Mattel began development on the toy line for the Arnold Schwarzenegger-driven sword and sorcery film, Conan the Barbarian. It was quickly realized that since the film would be rated R for violence against camels and horses, among other things, Mattel could not market a line of toys based on the film to children. It quickly evolved into something original. Mattel pivoted toward creating a toy line that featured three primary characters. Tankhead, Bullethead, and He-Man were the three original toy prototypes created. While the prototypes for these figures were all 12 inches, the actual toys would be 5.5 inches tall. This would make these action figures appear larger and more powerful than G.I. Joe's. Eventually, the characters Tankhead and Bullethead were shot down, pun intended, due to them being incredibly weird and arguably uncreative. However, the character of He-Man ended up sticking around, and Mattel would move forward developing a line of toys around the character. He-Man's design was combined with artist Mark Taylor's vision for a Tarzan-style character named Korak. The name didn't stick. The idea of a ripped dude in a fur bikini definitely did. The initial run of figures consisted of He-Man, Seaman, Bullman, Man-at-Arms, and a demon cleverly named He-Man. Being originally based on Conan the Barbarian, He-Man's physique was based on Arnold Schwarzenegger's body at the time. In fact, everyone in Eternia is totally shredded in almost the exact same way. This was actually a cost-saving technique employed by Mattel. Having the characters share body parts and molds would bring down production costs. Originally titled Lords of Power, the toy line would undergo a name change to Masters of the Universe to avoid any religious association. With the toy line finally set, Mattel began selling the action figures to various big-box retailers, and there was a lot of interest. However, without a real story behind the characters, children were getting confused as to who the villains and heroes were in the playset. This was a concern to retailers. Mark Ellis, the development executive for Mattel, lied to retailers who were balked at the toy line. He basically said, "Oh, we didn't tell you. We're also including mini comic books with all the toys in order to really hook kids and build a broader world for them." This ended up being a genius piece of improvisation, and the toy was sold. The first Masters of the Universe mini comics were produced by DC Comics and were written by Don Bluth, who famously wrote the novelization of The Empire Strikes Back. Bluth created the entire universe and narrative behind Eternia, having only been provided with a few Polaroid photos of the action figures. In the first run of comics, He-Man did not have his alter ego as Prince Adam. He was just He-Man all the time. He was probably pretty bummed out on chilly days. In the comics, Castle Grayskull was originally inhabited and operated by a spooky ghost named the Spirit of Grayskull, who was in charge of the castle's power. With the story set, the revised run of the Masters of the Universe toys included He-Man, Man-at-Arms, Battle Cat, Beastman, and of course, Skeletor. Skeletor's design was based on creator Mark Taylor's sketches of a character called the King of Styx. Battle Cat was actually created from a different toy line. It was suggested that Mattel take a pre-existing tiger figure from the Big Jim toy line and put a saddle on it. The decision to repurpose the figure saved Mattel hundreds of thousands of dollars in production costs. These were actually much-needed savings. In 1982, the rights holders to Conan the Barbarian came back and sued Mattel for infringing on their character design. Mattel would win the lawsuit, but you can totally see the influence Conan had on He-Man's creation. Eventually, the time came to pitch the toys to Toys R Us. The big box toy retailer expressed concern that 5-year-olds don't read and wouldn't be able to grasp the story behind Masters of the Universe. With more quick-on-the-spot thinking, Mark Ellis proposed an animated television special. This led to a meeting with Filmation producer Lou Scheimer, who gave the cartoon the green light. In 1983, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe would debut. It was one of the first cartoons ever produced for weekday syndication. The show needed to be produced quickly, so Filmation utilized a technique called rotoscoping to speed up the animation process. Rotoscoping is essentially just drawing over existing live-action footage. Fearing that the show would come off as being too serious for children, Filmation created the character of Orko to add some comedic relief to the cartoon. The show generated quite a bit of controversy at the time. It was one of the first cartoons to feature a muscular hero engaged in hand-to-hand combat, even though most of the combat was just someone drawing over videos of professional wrestlers. Fearing that the show would come off as being too violent, censorship boards would require every episode to end with a lesson PSA, some of which were pretty heavy, even for children.
Remember, it's your body and no one should touch you in a way that you feel is wrong.
Some groups of parents accused the show of being sexist due to the term He-Man being in the title. They weren't entirely wrong. It's twice as masculine as the word teen or man by themselves. Some pretty big names were attached to the writing side of the cartoon. Notably, J. Michael Straczynski, who would go on to write some of the most legendary Spider-Man stories ever told, and also create the television shows Babylon 5 and Sense8. Paul Dini also wrote for the show. He might remember him for creating Batman the Animated Series. He-Man's voice actor, John Irwin, also provided the vocal talent for the character of Beastman. He was known at the time for voicing the wisecracking character of Reggie Mantle on the cartoon Archie. 1983 saw the release of the first video game in the Masters of the Universe franchise, titled Masters of the Universe: The Power of He-Man. The game was released on the Atari 2600. It is borderline unplayable. I mean, look at that. Look how much fun nobody is having. It only took 2 years before Filmation realized that they had totally alienated young girls in a show called He-Man. In 1985, the character of She-Ra was introduced in the animated television special titled He-Man and She-Ra: The Secret of the Sword. The character was an immediate success with young girls, and She-Ra was given her own spin-off show called She-Ra: Princess of Power that same year. She-Ra's voice actress was Melindy Britt, who was known at the time for playing Batgirl and Catwoman on the original Batman animated show. The two cartoons, He-Man and She-Ra, were worked on at the same time by the same crew. By the mid-80s, countries around the world were coming down with a case of loincloth fever, specifically and weirdly in Brazil. He was even given his own Brazilian comic book series, serialized in newspapers. In the United States, He-Man would get his own newspaper comic strip, which began publication in 1986. Masters of the Universe was gaining a lot of global popularity, and it was only a matter of time before the franchise would catch the attention of the action film production powerhouse, Cannon Films. Cannon Films was known for producing schlocky, Chuck Norris-driven action movies. They wanted to get away from that, so they invested heavily in bringing Masters of the Universe to the big screen. David Odell was hired to pen the Masters of the Universe screenplay. He is known for his work on The Muppet Show, as well as writing the screenplay for The Dark Crystal. Cannon's big-budget dreams for Masters of the Universe were dashed. The production of Superman 4: The Quest for Peace began going downhill. Bleeding money, the production company needed to come up with a plan to make Masters more affordable. So, they decided to set the entirety of the movie on Earth, rather than build a very expensive fictional world of Eternia. Mattel ran commercials advertising the contest and promotion of the film. The winner, featured sponsor, would be featured in the film as Pictor, one of Skeletor's henchmen. He was allowed to keep the costume. Mattel had some pretty strict rules for the portrayal of He-Man in the live-action film. He-Man couldn't kill anyone, be violent, or appear weak. To get around the no-killing rule, Skeletor's henchmen were turned into robots. Mattel also demanded that no new characters were to be added to the film. The film's producer and notorious sexual predator Gary Goddard would later convince them to allow new characters to be added to the script by convincing them that new characters meant new toys. Dolph Lundgren, who was just coming out of a breakout role as Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, was hired to play the role of He-Man. At the time, Dolph Lundgren was a newcomer to Hollywood and had a thick Swedish accent. His lines were originally intended to be dubbed over, but in the end, Goddard decided to use Dolph's real voice. I've been looking for you. Masters of the Universe also introduced audiences to Friends star Courtney Cox. It was her first big role. Meg Foster was cast as Evil Lynn, and her costume weighed so much it often left her in bruises at the end of the day. The heavy costume is also why Evil Lynn is never seen sitting down. Frank Langella was cast as Skeletor, and he freaking crushes him. Seriously, his acting is so good, he makes this stupid laser whip look threatening. Frank Langella was actually very involved in the filmmaking process. He even helped add and rewrite Skeletor's dialogue to make it more theatrical and possess more gravitas.
Tell me about the loneliness of good He-Man.
Frank also later said that Skeletor was one of his favorite roles at the time. His son was a huge fan of He-Man. The character Gwildor was created to replace the character of Orko from the cartoon. The actor who played Blade in the film, Anthony DeLongis, was also the swordmaster on the film. He taught Dolph Lundgren to fight using a broadsword, and doubled as Skeletor during the film's climax. All of the character designs for the film were created by Ralph McQuarrie, who is the man responsible for creating the looks of many iconic Star Wars characters. C-3PO, R2-D2, Chewbacca, and Darth Vader were all designed by him. Skeletor's mask was later reused in Star Trek The Next Generation as the creature war fights on the holodeck. Towards the end of production, the film was running out of money. Gary Goddard eventually had to sink his entire salary into the production to get the film finished. The final fight at the end of the film was set in total darkness as a cost-saving technique. Having He-Man and Skeletor face off in the dark would eliminate the need for extras. Ultimately, the film was not received well. It underperformed at the box office and was seen as a failure for many years. That didn't stop Cannon from greenlighting a sequel, though. They rolled right into production on Masters of the Universe 2 and blamed the film's failure on Dolph Lundgren's performance. Not to mention the fact that Dolph was becoming a pretty expensive actor to have around. They recast He-Man with surfer Baird Hamilton. Director Albert Pyun was brought in to make Masters of the Universe 2 on a shoestring budget. Thankfully, we were all spared a further big-screen butchering of the franchise. The film was canceled. The movie was rewritten, and the existing sets and costumes would later be used to create the Jean-Claude Van Damme film disaster, Cyborg. Masters of the Universe's lackluster performance at the box office failed to generate any momentum for the franchise. Stores were overstocked with He-Man merch that nobody wanted to buy. He-Man would be taken out of production and lay dormant until the fall of 1990, when The New Adventures of He-Man premiered. The new show was designed to be a continuation of the 1980s cartoon, but featured some updates to the way some of the characters look. The most controversial element of New Adventures is Skeletor's design. He originally looked like a child's drawing of the Green Goblin. Fans didn't like it, so 5 episodes into the show, Skeletor mutates and his character was completely redesigned. Something that looks like Ghost Rider and Galactus had a baby that they didn't want. Fans didn't like that either, but they wouldn't get a third attempt at a redesign. The decision to bring Masters of the Universe away from its barbarian roots and into a technologically advanced future was poorly received by fans. The New Adventures of He-Man was considered to be the death of Masters of the Universe. Feeling alienated by the powers that be, fans of He-Man took to the internet and formed a community on the website He-Man.org. It was headed up by a man named Val Staples, and would serve as the primary hub for fans of Masters of the Universe. The community organized and used the power of meaningless petitions to try to get Mattel to greenlight a comic book adaptation of the original Masters of the Universe. Mattel refused to license the property. In 2002, Masters of the Universe would get a reboot on Cartoon Network's Toonami block. The new show was based on the new toy designs created by Sculpting Collective and Corbin McFarlane toy designers, the Four Horsemen. Seen as a return to form for Masters of the Universe, the toys and show became wildly popular with fans. Aware of the maturing fan base, the new Masters of the Universe featured darker and more adult storylines, exactly what the franchise needed. Season 2 of the show saw Skeletor take a backseat as the show's primary protagonist and introduced a new arch-villain for He-Man, King Hiss and his army of snake men. Season 2 also gave us an episode fleshing out the history of Castle Grayskull by providing an origin story for King Devon Grayskull, who is essentially just a more muscular He-Man with a cooler mullet. Oh, and the He-Man website founder dude, Val Staples. Well, he eventually got his wish, and Mattel tapped him to create a comic book relaunch of the Masters of the Universe. He would go on to write some of the best He-Man stories ever written. The new comics were published by CrossGen Comics, a subsidiary of Marvel Comics. They went on to publish 2 miniseries and a series of one-shot comics, one of which was a Beastman origin story, written by the creators of The Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman and Tony Moore. It is the only licensed work the two have ever done together outside of TWD. The attempted reboot started strong, but ultimately puttered out. He-Man was canceled yet again, and lay dormant for another 15 years. In 2018, Netflix launched She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. To bring the cartoon up to modern standards, the show rewrote She-Ra's rise to power as a result of her own heroism and initiative rather than He-Man's. The show was a success and proved that there was a lot more gas in the Masters of the Universe's tank, which led to a big-budget live-action version of Masters of the Universe entering pre-production. The film script was written by David S. Goyer, who wrote Batman Begins. The franchise's volatile history at the box office ultimately caused the studio to panic, and the film wouldn't receive funding. Goyer left the project. Character designer Carlos Huante released some designs of what the aesthetic of the film would have been. And boy, oh boy, look at that Skeletor. Let's hope this ends up getting made somehow. The next iteration of He-Man and the Masters is slated for release on Netflix. Masters of the Universe Revelation. It's a direct sequel to the original series. It is being directed by Kevin Smith and animated by Powerhouse Animation Studios. The Vampire Diaries star, Chris Wood, will voice Prince Adam, and Mark Hamill will be Skeletor. There's also a family-friendly origin cartoon in the works as well. It's about a young prince who will discover the power to become He-Man, Master of the Universe. Mattel has also recently released many Masters of the Universe action figures to their online subscription-based MLTV Classic stand. Don't lose hope for a live-action film either. There's still a lot of interest in bringing Masters of the Universe to the big screen, and Disney star Noah Centineo is said to be in talks to play Prince Adam. The script has been written by Matt Holloway of Men in Black International, and is said to be directed by Adam and Karen Lee of Band of Robbers. There are quite a few internet rumors that Sony is debating forgoing a theatrical release for this big-budget live-action adaptation and releasing it straight to Netflix as well. So the Masters of the Universe saga is far from over. Woo! There you have it. 100 facts about Masters of the Universe. Did we miss anything? Let us know in the comments below.